Hello and welcome to a conversation on the Daily Bern. I'm your host, Eric Miller, joined today by an awesome progressive from the great state of New Jersey, one of the progressive Democrats of New Jersey, Aissa Heath. How you doing, Aissa?
Good. I'm doing great. Happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for taking some time to chat with me. You're running with the group of the progressive Democrats for New Jersey General Assembly District 20. And I'll pull up a map of that. I'll give you an opportunity to brag on your district. I've had Jason Kreischu and Ricky Castaneda also running in the General Assembly alongside of you, and you're kind of running a bit of as a group. But your individual website, which forwards to the general website, is isa4assembly.com. I'll pull that up. Grassroots campaign. You don't take corporate PAC money. You want to clean the money out of politics. You're an awesome progressive, and I want to get into all of that stuff. But enough of my yakking. What initially motivated you? I'm thinking this is the first office you've run for. I know you've been an activist. Is that right? And I guess the question is, what initially motivated you, animated you politically?
Yeah, so this is actually not the first time running. I actually ran last primary for freeholder, which is now called commissioner. And essentially what motivated me to run was just seeing the conditions in my community. And so I grew up working class. I grew up poor. I was raised by my mom, single parent, with two siblings that have mental illnesses that are really chronic, both schizophrenia. And for me, a lot of what I would see is my friends, family, community struggling to survive, right? I know people who are working 2 different jobs, going back to back, sometimes 3. I've worked 3 jobs at one point, and it's a lot. It's a lot to really be able to survive in New Jersey, let alone in this district. And so for me, I want to be able to be a change agent and represent people in my community, because a lot of the people who are elected now don't really know these struggles, or these struggles are so foreign to them at this point that they don't really remember that people are really suffering, especially now during this pandemic.
Yeah, and to that point, you do not take corporate PAC money. You're progressive, right? And in your bio on your website, can you talk about that a little bit? I don't need to say it. I'll let you say it. Tell me.
Yeah, so I do not take corporate PAC money at all. We are a grassroots funded campaign. Every single donation, whether it's $5, $10, $15, whatever you can donate, every single little bit helps. And we are not here to represent corporate interests. We are not here to represent the interests of the political elite. We are here to represent working class people. And again, we are all coming from working class backgrounds. We are all coming from the community. I was born and raised in Elizabeth. And so I have a very good understanding of what exactly this district needs and what are the issues facing the everyday people in our community.
Excellent. Yeah, I want to ask about some of the frontline issues in the district and stuff, but before I get into that, I watched an interview you did with I think it was called Upfront Now. It's on YouTube. If you search for Aissa Heath on YouTube, you'll find it. And it was you and the host, and I didn't write down her name. I apologize for that. But you were talking about voter shaming, and there's this. Yeah, and I really appreciate your perspective, and I just wanted you to have another chance to talk about that. There's this presumption of, blocks of voters that just automatically would go Democrat, even if results aren't delivered and so forth. What is that like? Talk about your perspective on that and your experiences with that.
Yeah, so I was on Upfront Now with Imani Oakley, and essentially what we were talking about is how specific demographics, whether it's young voters, particularly Black voters, are expected to vote with the Democratic Party and often get nothing in return, right? And we kind of saw this happening in Georgia, where we were promised $2,000 checks, right? Or people in Georgia were promised $2,000 checks. And a lot of that turnout was driven primarily by, Black voters, and it was Black women at the forefront who were organizing and getting people out to vote. And so to see, these promises being made, whether it's in Georgia or whether it's in New Jersey, that, certain things will happen, things will better our community if we vote along party lines. And then to see the reality, which is that we don't see any of those changes. We see the same status quo, same politicians doing the same exact thing, and nothing really substantial really changes in the district, let alone in the state. It's how many times do we have to be pushed into these certain, these vote blue no matter who conversations until we start seeing the real results from our voting and from our, organizing on the streets. And so for me, that was really a big point, because I was vote shamed. I was said, why would you vote against your best interest? Why would you, complain about Joe Biden or things like that. And it's like, I keep hearing the same, we're going to do great things for the Black community. We're going to do great things for the youth, but never seeing the results that are needed, that are so desperately needed.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, boy, what a great example too. It was, the John Ossoff or Raphael Warnock, one of them tweeted like the day of, vote for me, $2,000 checks. And then, immediately thereafter it was like $1,400 checks. Go team, go, right? Like, hey, wait a minute. It was just, yeah. And it literally was like one day to the next. What are your thoughts on your thoughts or hopes or expectations, tempered be they, for the Biden administration?
I don't hope for much. I don't expect much. I hope for much, but don't expect much. Like, Joe Biden has a 40-year history of doing things that are detrimental, not only to the Black community, but to students, people with student loans. Like, he is one of the reasons why many people can't file for bankruptcy with private student loans. He is the author of the crime bill. So there's so many different things that Joe Biden and his administration, there's some people that are, there are people that are great, but most people have a history of being part of the problem that we see in working class communities. And so I think we need to continue to push this administration as much as we can, but we also need to organize outside of electoral politics, which is one of the reasons why I do so much work in the community, why I do things with Union County Mutual Aid, why I do things with the North New Jersey DSA, and why I do things with PDNJ, because we can't just stop. Voting is a good mechanism. It's one tool, but it's not the only tool that we have as working class people.
Love it. Tell me about that Union County Mutual Aid.
Yeah, so Union County Mutual Aid, came up through this crisis, through COVID-19, and we saw so many people, losing their jobs, on the verge of being evicted, right? The only thing really stopping are the moratoriums that are in place. But a lot of people don't have access to food, and sometimes people are undocumented. Sometimes people are not technically registered as being, in the state of New Jersey, but they might be living with relatives. They might be here for some other reasons and don't have access to these things, through normal nonprofit, mechanisms. You kind of need to have things like a driver's license. You need to have registration saying that you live in the state of New Jersey. And so what mutual aid seeks to do is to really make sure that we're taking care of people, not through charity, but through solidarity. And that we're taking care of people as though they are our family members, they're our close friends, because that's what our community is, right? We look out for each other. And Union County Mutual Aid seeks to build that. And we hope to build a solidarity, not just within Union County Mutual Aid, but with other mutual aid groups and throughout the state of New Jersey.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's amazing. And you mentioned you're associated with DSA, Progressive Democrats in New Jersey as well. Tell me about the seat you're running for. Tell me about the General Assembly seat that you're running for.
Yeah, so I am running for this seat, which is currently held by Jamal Hawley and I forgot her first name, but Quijano. But essentially, yeah. But they're people who are just kind of like bodies for the county line. And it's really funny because when Jamal Hawley announced that he was not going to be running for the seat again, one of the people within the Democratic committee mentioned that he can't win off the line. And it really speaks to the kind of issues that are in this district, that are in Union County, that are in New Jersey, where if you don't fall in line with the Democratic Party, you don't have a good seat for you on this line, right? And we have this system that really displaces and disenfranchises working people, because I don't have any political connections to these rich elite people. I don't want to sell my soul or to, compromise on my values to have a seat on this line. And so it's kind of like, what do you do then? And so one of the reasons why I think it's important to do organizing work, and, is because we need to start addressing these issues, like getting people educated about what is the county line and why is it so detrimental to progress in New Jersey. And so that is, yeah.
Yeah, what you mentioned, I don't know what that is necessarily in that terminology. I'm thinking of the ballot access, but what are you referring to when you're saying the county line, the line?
So essentially, when you look at a New Jersey a ballot, right, you have, in other states, you have everything grouped by office, right? So you'll have the president, everyone running for president. It's not like that in New Jersey. In New Jersey, you're on a column with other people that you've grouped together with. And so the Democratic Party, what they do in the county committees is that they basically assign people, places to run, right? So if you're in cahoots with all of these elite political, very wealthy people, you might get a seat on that line if you do the bidding of these very corrupt political establishment Democrats. But if you're a progressive like me and you're like, hey, I want to really do something meaningful in the community, I want to make really strong changes, you can't get on that ballot line because you don't fall into the motivations, which is usually, money or some type of political influence that's aligned with them. So they'll never have you on that line. There's no way that you'll be able to make entryway. And they use this ballot design to keep people, to keep progressive, to keep working class people, to keep disenfranchised groups out of office. And the only time you can be in office as a disenfranchised person is if you're willing to compromise on your values and disenfranchise others.
Yeah. So that's what I thought you were referring to. So on the ballot, there's literally columns, right? And you're the in column, the establishment column, if you will. And if you're not in that column, people tend to just vote, straight Democrat, and they vote for that one column. Whereas Issa might be on the second column because she's not towing the line or whatever, right? Yeah, that's what I thought you meant. I talked to Hesser Oseguera, who ran the House race last time, and he managed to be in the first column, and it was like a big deal. Like, because that's the default Democratic. If you just go in and vote straight D, and you're not, sort of splitting your ticket or whatever and voting for the better candidate, you're automatically, there's an automatic drop off if you're not in that first column on that ballot, right?
Yeah, there's that, but there's also the fact that they have an ability to fill the line quicker, right? You have all of these people that are just lined up to just fill places. So if you're progressive, let's say you're not like me and you're not grouping along with like Jason or Ricky, right? You're just someone who just wants to run generally for a position because you really care about it and you feel like you'd be the best person for that specific position. You are at a strong disadvantage if you don't end up, lining up with other people with similar values. And it's all just fundamentally wrong. It's not democratic in any means. And it's not something that only benefits progressives. Any person, whether you align with a specific political party or not, should have the opportunity to run fairly and to run, based on your own merits and based on your own experiences. And sadly enough, the Democratic Party, as it proclaims to be so democratic and so for the people, uses these mechanisms to keep people out. So it's a really hard thing to overcome, but we're trying our best to do so.
Yeah. Well, the election day is June 8th, if I'm not mistaken, right? June 8th. So let me just pull up your website real quick. So this is, if you go to issaforassembly.com, it'll automatically forward you to the general page, which is, LD20 progressives. Dems.com, but just go to issaforassembly.com and it'll automatically forward you here. Same for rickyforassembly.com. So this, if you donate here or sign up here, you could work for all three of these campaigns. And I've had Jason and Ricky on previously. Hopefully, as the date nears, I'll have the three of you on together. That'll be an awesome panel. But yeah, you can make a donation. You can sign up and volunteer. Like Issa said, she's not a giant corporate PAC recipient, just the opposite. And your bio here is really incredible. And forgetting my glasses on here, there's one line here that just gave me chills, right? This line right here. Union County doesn't just need people who look like us. We need people who act like us, who live like us, who care like us. Boy, that last line, who care like us, like that is so potent, right? So, just talk about that a little bit, if you don't mind.
Yeah, so it kind of goes back to what I was saying before, where we don't have people who actually understand these experiences, who don't actually understand what it is to really be cemented in working class communities, right? A lot of people that run for office are often, connected to people, whether it's through certain money avenues or things like that. And I really want there to be representation of people who know what it's like to work 3 jobs, people who've been working since 16, people who have family members who are caretakers to family members who might have chronic mental illnesses or physical disabilities, and who can really understand and really see themselves, in our communities, right? Because it's one thing to just say, yeah, I'm from here. I live in Elizabeth, but it's another thing to be in Elizabeth. It's another thing to know people in Elizabeth, to know your neighbors in Elizabeth, or to know them in Union, or to know them in Roselle, or to know them in Hillside, and there's a lot of issues and nuances that, you have to be connected to really know your area and to know your family and your community. And I really want there to be people who care and not just run just for the hell of it. Because I personally don't want to be running. I'm a really introverted, quiet person, and I was asked to run by a few people, and I said, you know what, I'll do it to be a representative of other people, but to lift their voices, not just to create my own platform. Like, that is not my goal. That's why I continue to do activist work and to do organizing work outside of electoral politics. Amazing.
That's just so great. And you say introvert, you do not seem at all shy. So it's IssaForAssembly.com. So again, this is a unique situation you have going, where the three of you running together. You're sort of cross-pollinating, sharing resources. So throw $20, $30, it'll get split amongst these three campaigns. And if you were one of those people that was animated by the con man in the last administration, and now there's this silence and calm, like, stay engaged. There are races out here that matter, right? Even if you don't live in New Jersey in the LD20, I'm gonna pull the district in a moment, you can make a difference, right? And Aissa and Ricky and Jason are running to make material differences to the people in their district, and there's it helps us all, right? So again, it's IssaForAssembly.com, and I'll put the website, it's on the graphics as well. But I like to give my candidates, my guests, an opportunity to brag on their district, right? I did the same for Ricky and Jason, I believe. So tell me about New Jersey General, the District 20, born and raised there. What should people know about it?
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a few key places that I love, and then I'll talk more generally about the district. So I want to give a shout out to Van Gogh's Cafe in Union. It's a really great small cafe. Great if you just want like some loose leaf teas and stuff like that. There's Red Apple and Elizabeth, which is my favorite Chinese spot. And then there's Ice Moon, which is pretty new in Elizabeth, on Elizabeth Ave, which is a place that has those like frozen circle ice creams and also sells bubble tea. I'm just so happy I don't have to travel outside of Elizabeth anymore to get bubble tea. So some spots there. I think one of the things I love about this district specifically is that everyone is so close to a park, or they're close to a place where you can do something like some type of leisurely activity, right? So I live in a place where, like, if I go down a few blocks, I'm by two different parks, depending on which way I go. And the parks each have their own like characteristics, which is very unique. And I think it's something that we don't always see in New Jersey. I used to do Lyft. I used to be a Lyft driver, so I would drive around all across New Jersey, and I wouldn't always see, little parks here and there. And what I love about LD20, in this area, is that it's easy to go by a park. It's easy to find a couple of shops to go to. There's always a lot of local businesses that are, doing different things. And I really love that character that you don't always see throughout New Jersey. So I really love living here, and I hope to be able to afford to keep living here. But those are some of the things that I love about this place.
Love it. Yeah. So what are some of the frontline issues that are important to you that you want to start working on, should you get into the assembly?
So I think when if I get into the assembly, what I want to do is to stop doing these things where they're just incremental changes, right? They're little tiny changes that don't do much. I want to start pushing for big changes. And I think one of the things that we kind of see is that, we get all these little promises of like reform. And one of the examples is like during the Black Lives Matter protests, how, people are saying we're going to defund the police and we're going to fund our communities. And now people are rolling back and, who are in office right now saying, maybe we need to reconsider that notion, saying they're committed to like Black Lives Matter, and then kind of going back once it's no longer politically convenient. And I want to really be able to say, hey, we're going to de-invest into things, right? Like, instead of doing these like reactive things, like trying to stop crime, how about we prevent crime? How about we address the issues that cause people to do things, criminal things, right? Like, there are people who are experiencing homelessness right now. There are people who don't have access to food. And so one of the things I really want to tackle is like housing. And a lot of the ways we can tackle that is by shifting our priorities from this criminalization, the school to prison pipeline, or all of these things that cause people to fall into this criminal justice system, and take some of that money and reinvest it back into the community. Let's start thinking about how we can really start developing public housing, mixed income housing. How can we start getting people to have stability in their lives where they don't have to worry about whether or not they can afford to live here? Things like strengthening unions in New Jersey. Let's make sure that people can, be able to join a union without fear of getting fired. I saw on Twitter like earlier today about the Instacart situation where they just laid off a bunch of people because they wanted to unionize. You know, we need to really make sure there's workers' rights and that all workers can unionize, not just certain workers, not just a few workers. Every worker has the right and should be entitled to their labor, and to the wealth that their labor generates. And I really feel like we need to start pushing in that direction, and we need to push strongly. We need no more incremental changes. So that's kind of like where my head is at right now.
Excellent. I love it. Fierce urgency of now. I feel you on that. I want to, since you mentioned unions, I think I talked to Ricky about this a little bit. One of the points that he made is, sort of the undocumented communities in some of the, urban areas in your district. And, I noted that the airport is there, and I assume there's unions, associated with the airport and stuff. Can you talk about, go a little bit more into unions, into worker rights for the undocumented and so forth?
Yeah, so I tried my best to just, always make this point that, like, at the end of the day, whether you're making $3 an hour, making $15 an hour, we will never be making what Jeff Bezos makes. Jeff Bezos made $13 billion in a day, and he made that money on the labor of the working class people. He made that money through not paying his workers the wages they're really entitled to. And so when we're fighting for workers' rights, we have to consider all workers, because when we have any worker that is disenfranchised, that comes back to us in some way or another. We want to make sure that undocumented people are paid the same for their labor, because their labor is intensive. And we saw during COVID-19, or right now, we see how essential workers are, especially the workers who are being underpaid, especially workers who, who survive on tipped wages, how desperately they need to be paid the amount that they're owed. And so for me, it's really important that we're making sure that all people can unionize, that we're trying to get rid of any type of legislation that's going to limit certain sectors of the working force to not be able to unionize. I really want to make sure that people have a way to strengthen their rights as workers. And I think it's important that we fight for all workers and not just some.
Yeah, hear, hear. And, not just from the moral perspective, but that's a unique thing about you, or one of your strengths is you have the economic background to make the economic argument as well, right? Not only is it good, in terms from a righteous perspective, but it's good from an economic perspective, right?
Yes, absolutely. And we kind of see this too when we're having these larger conversations about why should we pay people more money? The reality is that people who are in working class, even if you're in the quote unquote middle class, which I honestly just group in with working class, because if you have to work to survive, you're a part of the working class. And so we are the people who put money back into the economy. We spend our money at our local businesses. We spend our money at restaurants. We spend our money to try to improve our lives. And that's why when I hear these conversations about who should be entitled to stimulus checks, right? What does it matter when all of that money is just going to keep getting funneled back? It's going to propel our economy. And that's why it's so important that we stop listening to people who are making billions of dollars in one day and start listening to the people around us. They need the money. Some people are on the fringes of becoming homeless, and some people are, maybe just want an extra couple $100 to spend, and they're going to pull it back into the economy anyway. So let's be realistic about who's going to be spending money, who's going to be, elevating this economy, and who's getting elevated, right? The rich are not going to elevate us. Jeff Bezos is not coming to your local bakery and spending millions of dollars at your store. So let's be I want people to be a little bit serious about where this money could really go. And that's why we need to start fighting for things like stimulus checks, fighting for things to make sure people have money, and fighting for workers' rights.
Ah, so good. So safe to say you're not going to make it into office and suddenly start taking giant checks from Comcast and big farm companies, and then start talking about trickle down. You just got to be patient. Trickle down economics totally works. You just got to wait generation. You're not going to, right?
Absolutely not. I think for me, I lived it. I know what it's like. I was in college full time, working 3 different jobs, juggling back and forth, barely getting through because I'm trying to survive. So I know what it's like. I know when you get an extra check or something comes through, whether it's through school or it's through the government, how much that money means and how much it can make a difference on your life. And so for me, a lot of what grounds me is my morals and, my spirituality. And so I feel like there's certain things I just won't compromise on. It's not worth the risk. It's not worth, any amount of money. And I feel like it really shows through our campaign. I think what I love about running with Jason and Ricky is that, like, I made it very clear, there are some things about me that are a little bit more radical than the average person. I am a socialist, and I'm very proud of that. I am very proud to fight for workers' rights. I'm very proud to fight to make sure people have housing and to do organizing work. And I said, is this going to be a risk to the group? And they're like, no, be yourself, be who you are. And, at the end of the day, who I am is someone who wants to fight for working people and fight for the betterment of humanity. And for me, that's what I'm here for, and nothing else.
Awesome. Yeah, not a risk. There's nothing radical in what you said right there. You mentioned housing. We didn't talk about that a little bit. Is it, and I guess you mentioned earlier homelessness. Talk about, how can you make material changes in the assembly on that front, on homelessness, dealing with that issue?
I think we have to really start thinking about how money is distributed into housing policies, right? I saw something, in Elizabeth where they're letting people live in public housing for a certain amount of time, right? And the reality is like, the idea is that you'll live in housing for a certain amount of time, and then you'll get a job, and then you'll be able to afford it, and then your rent will go up. But the problem that doesn't ever get addressed is what happens when your rent skyrockets to a level that is not within your income range. And I feel like we need to find a way to really start tackling these issues about rent, about, because a lot of people in New Jersey rent, especially in this district. There's a lot of renters that we don't ever really talk about. We need to think about people who are getting priced out of their homes because we're giving all of these tax abatements to real estate developers, in this district, especially because we're a really train heavy, public transportation heavy district. And I see throughout all of these towns that there's so many developers that are getting these tax abatements. They're not paying taxes for 30 years and then they leave. And it's pricing out people with, it's pricing out renters, but it's also going to start pricing out people who live in homes, because it's going to be cheaper, it's going to start changing the way that people can afford their housing. And it's just going to create this unbalanced economy within our district and within New Jersey in general, because it's happening. We're seeing the gentrification, and we're seeing how it's also pushing out homeowners. And so we need to find ways to tackle those types of policies, and to make sure when we're distributing money for certain types of like things like that, where we're trying to give people housing for a certain amount of time, rent controlled, that there's really a long-term plan, and it's not something like a short Band-Aid on a gushing wound.
Yeah, and that's one of those areas, one of those lobbying groups that doesn't get exposed nearly enough, is the real estate lobby, or developer lobby. That was in AOC's initial race, that was her biggest opponent, was the dark money that Joe Crowley took from real estate, big real estate, right? So I'm assuming that's similar in your district, that you talk, as soon as anybody says abatement, I assume that that's a result of a bribe, right? A donation, right?
Yeah.
Is that one of the struggles that you would have to fight in the assembly, is big money from real estate companies?
Yeah, so I mean, like, if you look at people who have run in this district and who succeed, a lot of times they're getting money from real estate developers. They're getting money from either them or from connections through real estate, the real estate, like, I guess, area or sector rather. And so I think that's one of the things that we have to really we have to be very frank about. Like, we don't talk a lot about housing. We don't really talk about these struggles. We also don't mention how people are living. Like, there can be a one family home, and you find out that each of those rooms are rented because people either can't afford the mortgage, or they're trying to make an extra buck on someone, giving out a space that's so limited because there's not a lot of good quality housing. And so I feel like that's one of the things that we really need to tackle, because until we can really make sure people are situated, that people have good housing, have good access to their basic standards of survival, how can we start propelling the working class to be more activated in politics, to be more activated in the community? We have to make sure that basic needs are met. So for me, that's why it's such a key issue to me, like things like that, and things like food security, things like, being able to access, really good paying jobs.
Great. Yeah, let's universal broadband. That's a big issue. Particularly during the pandemic, and talk about. I assume you would support getting universal broadband in your district. Talk about that.
Absolutely. So actually read about this a little bit, and I saw that I don't remember the exact city in the U.S., but there is a city that actually tried to do this, and it was very successful. I know Elizabeth's public schools also offered free broadband for students, and the reality is like just like water, electricity, just like some of these basic things, it's become a way of life, right? For people to work, a lot of us are working from home, and we need the internet. We need access to the internet. It's a way of communication now. It's a way that people communicate, and to deprive people of something so fundamental in our society now is a shame. Like, people need access to the internet. It's not just something anymore that's just a luxury for the few. It's a basic part of our society now, and so we need to make sure that people can access these things and have some type of mobility, out of absolute poverty. And a lot of times that's the way. If you have good access to the internet, or you have some connections to be able to develop your resume online or things like that, or just basic broadband, like for students as well. Like, students need to learn, and it's very clear now that the virtual space of learning is only going to continue at this point, because this is probably not going to be the last pandemic that we experience. It's probably not going to be the last natural disaster that happens. And some like we're going to have these issues where we're going to need students to be able to study from home, and we need to make sure that they have the access that they need.
Here, here. So again, it's issaforassembly.com. If you make a donation, sign up to volunteer, donate, big red button up here on the right-hand column. Sign up, get involved in campaigns like this, particularly this one, because it's the three of them. So more bang for your buck. I want to ask a little bit of a horse race question. I asked it of my guest yesterday, and I really appreciated her response. Cece Gerlach, she's running for mayor of Allentown. So I'm going to ask you similar. I imagine, I know it's a densely populated area. I didn't look at the numbers, but I'm assuming it's safely blue, and I'm assuming voter turnout isn't what we would hope it would be ever, right? So the way I phrased it to her yesterday, and I'll say the same to you, how do you Stacey Abrams it? How do you get those people out to vote? Like, how are you going to, you have the right message. The three of you have the right message. It's a good, all that stuff. How are you going to get people animated on June 8th to, wake up, get dressed, go out and vote?
Well, we have to meet people where they're at, right? People are not, there are a lot of people who are not following progressive circles. And so we need to meet them where they're at, whether they're at church, whether through like local organizations, whether they're at work. We need to find ways to connect to people and the issues that they're facing directly. I think a lot of the times these elected establishment Democrats take for granted the fact that there are so many people who don't vote. And the minute you start talking to people in this district, you say, hey, these are issues I care about, or I lived here and I know what it's like, they get animated. And we kind of saw that the last time where, in the last primary where I ran for the first time. I have no experience as like a political, candidate before then. And I, we lost, but I had a pretty good turnout. And that's because we were reaching out to people in the community. We were talking to different leaders, and we're saying, hey, these are issues that we care about. These are the things that we're running on. And, we also have our work in the community to show for it. And I think when people see that you're not just some, talking point, and you're not just going to say things people want to hear, they're going to come out to vote. They're going to be there because people are tired and people are frustrated with the same old, and they want something new. They want someone who's going to make a really good change, and they want someone who's not afraid of change, which is something I'm not, and I'm pretty sure Jason and Ricky are not. We're here to make real changes because we don't have time. We have climate change going on. We have this pandemic going on. We have racial inequality going on, and like we can't stop. We have to push forward, and it can be uncomfortable at times. It can be scary, but when you have solutions for people and you tell people what you're going to do, people start having hope again, and they have hope in a better future. And so that's what I'm hoping that our campaign can do, is show people there is a way out. There is a way out of this terrible, terrible mess that we're in. But it's going to take work. And I always like to be honest about that. It's going to take a lot of work. It's going to take a lot of organizing, both within electoral politics and out of it, whether it's through direct action, mutual aid, whether it's through unions and labor working rights and stuff like that. It's going to take some time, but we're going to get there. We will.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, and there's this rising tide of, Bernie's the first one in my lifetime where, you could get to that level without taking the corporate PAC money, without compromising your principles, and so forth. He's not infallible. I'm not saying that, right? But then AOC in that wave, then the squad, and, this time around, Cori Bush, Jamal Bowman, so many candidates are running, and we can see, like, there is traction, there is momentum, you don't have to take corporate PAC money. You don't have to watch CNN and millionaires paid by billionaires to tell you money's everything, right? She won her race in, against Crowley because she knocked on doors, and exactly what you said. She met people where they were, right? And you're righteous. You have the right message. You're not corrupted. You're not there representing the real estate lobby or whatever the lobby. You're there because you were an activist first, as was Ricky, as was Jason, right? So, that should, people should be responding to that. So, boy, it's so inspiring to see so many great candidates. So, thank you for what you're doing. Is there, before we close out, again, it's June 8th is the election day. You can go to njprogressives.com. That's New Jersey Progressives, and also ISSA4assembly.com. Make a donation, sign up, volunteer, share this video, go like her on our socials. There's a million topics I could talk to you about policy-wise. And I look forward to having you on with your buddies in your ticket. But is there anything today that we didn't hit on that you want to talk about or highlight, like platform-wise, let's say?
Platform-wise? That's so hard. There's so many things I want to hit on. I think for me, I want to make something really clear to people about the way that I think, right? I'm running for office, but I make it very clear that I don't stop doing the work outside of this, that I still continue to engage in Union County Mutual Aid. I'm still connecting in with the DSA, with PD&J. I think it's really important that people, we get out to vote, we get people in office, but also we keep doing the work. And for me, I want to really push that organizing doesn't just start and stop at the ballot box. It needs to continue on in our community and making sure that we're there for each other. So for me, that's really one of the main things I want to plug in.
Awesome. Yeah, it didn't begin and end with Trump. In my videos, I always say stay engaged, right? It matters, like these races. And I didn't look at the turnout, but a race like yours is going to be determined probably by a couple hundred votes or something, right? So, every little bit makes a huge difference.
Yes, absolutely. And I really hope that people see this and, can see that we're not playing around. We're being very serious. We're trying to get our heads in the game, and we want to win this. But we need you. I need people to come out and vote. And, every voter, I appreciate you. Every supporter, you're getting us there. And, and I always appreciate that and be grateful for that.
Awesome. Yeah. Boy, good luck on June 8th. I'll talk to you before then, but again, it's ISSA4assembly.com. The sooner you donate, the more impact it has on the campaign, and just get involved, stay engaged. Like Issa's saying, the fight doesn't end. It's not just electoral politics, but we can have wins here and so forth. And yeah, we need to put our money where let's see, where am I? There's Dr. King right there. Dr. King. We need to put our money where our mouth is on the fierce urgency of now, right? We need to elect people that are, not going to do this incremental bullshit change. We need Issa in there fighting because it's righteous and she's sincere. So thank you for your time today. Thank you for all the work you've done heretofore. Can't wait to have you back. Yeah, just thank you.
Yeah, I can't wait to be back. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. One last time, ISSA4assembly.com.
Yep.
Great. Thank you. Stay safe. Have a good night.
You too.
Thanks. Bye.